If you've got tomatoes, you've got a meal. Okay, some of you are probably thinking, how is fresh tomato a meal? Growing up in a low income situation, if you gave me tomato with a little bit of salt, that was a delicious snack. You gave me two, that was a meal. And the first way I'm gonna show you, you might consider it a struggle meal, which I don't. I consider it just delicious, and it's something I do all the time. Some of you have home gardens and you are harvesting tomatoes and wondering, what do I do with my tomatoes? Other than canning and jarring, which is great, I'm gonna give you some ideas and inspiration for tomatoes. So I'm gonna take 2 tomatoes. I've rinsed them and I'm just gonna slice them into slices, into rounds, slices. I don't know. Is that how you say it? There we go. And then you're just gonna put them on your plate. So we always had like Louisiana hot sauce, but I have it here in a condiment little packet. Some soy sauce. We always had this in our refrigerator or drawers from leftover takeout when we got that. And a lime. Okay, tomatoes on a plate. And then we're gonna go in with a little bit of the soy sauce. And we would cut a whole bunch of these, so the soy sauce would just, there we go, like that. And then the hot sauce all over. And then you take your lime. And if I didn't have like soy sauce, I would just use like a pinch of salt. But lime all over, oh my gosh. So when I was growing up, I wouldn't use chopsticks. I would just do this with my hands. But you know, I'm filming this. Oh, if you don't like eating noises, just scroll ahead. So delicious. When I don't have hot sauce, I add tahini. I add some. Okay, that was so good. I'm gonna finish that. Let me show you some other recipes where you can use fresh tomato into the mix, whether it's the star of the show or it's the supporting actor to a delicious meal. Here we go. One of the easiest stir fries I make. Okay, so to start, I'm gonna prep my ingredients. Here I have like 3 or 4 scallions that I needed to use. It's kind of like the last of the bunch. I'm going to chop the green tops and place that in a separate bowl from the whites. You want to do this because the whites are going to go into the stir fry first, and then you kind of garnish with the green tops. So I'm chopping up the scallion whites, and if I didn't have scallion, I'd add a little bit of like white or yellow onion. I do that sometimes. Okay, put that in a bowl unsuccessfully. Use the tomatoes, like hothouse tomatoes work for this. I have Roma on hand all the time, and I split it right in half, and then you remove that little stem piece from the top. And then you slice right down the middle, long ways, and then you kind of like cut it at an angle into chunks. Sometimes I even stir fry this in just like quick, thick slices. It just depends. So essentially I am making a very popular Chinese or Cantonese dish of a tomato egg stir fry, but it's really not a traditional or authentic recipe that I'm showing you. It's kind of like the convenient way I like to make this. There are definitely more traditional techniques to making this, so I suggest, you know, kind of search Google or YouTube to see a more authentic version. This is kind of what I just do in my home, and it's really tasty. So I'm just going to continue chopping and prepping my Roma tomatoes. In a bowl, I'm going to add around 2 teaspoons of light soy sauce. Here I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of chicken bouillon powder. I'm also going to add some sugar. I started with a 1/4 teaspoon, but in all I used 1/2 teaspoon. And now I'm going to add like a 1/4 cup to a 1/3 cup of water. Actually, I think I used a 1/4 cup, but I think a 1/3 cup goes better with this recipe. And 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. And essentially you made a sauce/slurry. Okay, give that a really good mix. And this is also going to go into the stir fry. So I'm going to crack my eggs in a bowl, and you'll want to beat and scramble them in the bowl. I'm actually making a late lunch, early dinner for my husband and I. My kids already ate.
Can I have some too?
You change your mind? Okay, yeah. That's fine. This always happens. So I'm going to add an extra egg right into the bowl. That'll be enough for 3 people. And like I said, if you want to double this to serve good portions for 4 people, do so. It makes a great dinner. Here I'm going to add another tomato. Okay, so you'll want to preheat a pan or a wok. I'm just using this electric skillet. I'm adding some cooking oil, maybe like a tablespoon and a half right into the preheated pan. And I'm going to go in with the scallion whites first. You also can mince a clove of garlic to go into the mix. I don't know, I just like the onion flavor in this stir fry, but garlic also works. So give that a quick stir fry. And at this point, you'll want to make sure you have a preheated pan to work with. Now going in with my chopped tomato. I want to mention that if you are adhering to a more traditional or authentic tomato egg stir fry, essentially you would cook the egg first, remove it from the pan, and then saute the tomatoes until they kind of break down and release a lot of their moisture. But I like a firm tomato in this, so that's why I'm kind of going rogue with this recipe here. So a little more oil, and now I'm going to add the egg. And I add it to one side of the pan because I sort of want it to cook on its own before I start mixing it into the egg. Essentially, that's when I'm just going to start pushing them around the pan. And at some point, I will be mixing them with the tomatoes. But already this smells fabulous. And like I said, if you have 1 tomato and 2 eggs, or 2 tomatoes and 1 egg, work with this stir fry. It totally works. You can easily make this for 1 person. For those of you that are busy, that have busy jobs, busy lives, and come home and want to cook for yourselves, this is such a versatile stir fry. So I'm going to move the camera closer here because I want you to see what's going on in the pan. And already it's almost done. So what I'm going to do is sort of start folding and mixing the tomato and egg together. And I like the egg to be kind of completely cooked before I add the sauce. So I'm just going to move that around. So I've added some extra cooking oil to the pan, and in goes the sauce. And you want to make sure you're working with like a medium to medium high heat. You don't want the pan to get cold when you're doing the stir fry. Essentially, this is why people work with really hot woks when they do this. So everything's simmering and sizzling in the pan, and essentially you can see right in the pan that this sauce is already thickening. So I'm going to start mixing it in with the egg and tomato. And within seconds, this is done. And it smells amazing. If you are a fan of egg foo young, this kind of has sort of like the same flavor profile when you have egg foo young and the sauce or the gravy that goes with it. It's kind of like the same sort of flavor profile. Texturally, no, but the flavor is there. This is really one of my favorites. I can't tell you how quick and easy, delicious, and budget-friendly this is. I make this all the time, even if it's just for myself. Scallions, and it's time to dig in. And dare I say, if I were by myself, I would just eat this right out of the pan. And I'd probably eat this all by myself. But I am going to serve this with rice to make it a bit more hearty as a meal. And there you have it. One of my favorite simple, easy stir fries. I've got my rice, so now I'm just going to add a couple scoops of this amazing stir fry. I think the amazing part, some of you might look at this and go, what is this? Or why is this amazing? I think for me personally, because it comes together so quick, I always have a lot of pantry staples and eggs, tomatoes. Essentially, it's a good source of protein, and tomatoes are not super expensive, so it makes a great, quick, delicious meal. Okay, so I garnished with some scallions, and it's time to dig in. And let me just say this. This may not look like much to you, but this recipe is one of my favorite stir fries, and it also goes on my comfort food list. So good. I'm craving entomatadas, especially the ones that my grandmother used to make from scratch. So let me show you how I make them. Okay, so I'm starting off by making corn tortillas from scratch. In a bowl, I'm going to add masa harina, and my grandmother would make these from scratch every single day, whether it be corn or flour. Okay, so I eyeballed the amount, but I'll put something in the description below. Actually, I'm just going to copy the package instructions. So I added a pinch of salt, give that a mix for the dry ingredients, and now I'm going to add warm water until the dough comes together. So I'm pretty sure the package ingredients call for something like 2 1/4 cups of masa harina, a teaspoon of salt, and a cup and a half of warm water. I definitely used more than 2 1/4 cups of masa harina, so that's a good starting point. Just use the package instructions. Okay, so I'm going to give this a really good mix until it comes together into a dough ball. And I'm going to let this rest. So I'm going to cover it with cling film and just let it set, hang out, and rest until I'm ready to use it. By the way, just use store-bought. I do that too, but I really wanted homemade because it's what my grandmother would do. Okay, in a preheated pan, I'm adding a little bit of cooking oil, and I'm working with 4 Roma tomatoes that I have clearly cut in half. Here I have a small piece of onion. I'm going to use a jalapeno that definitely needs to be used. It's turned red. And here I have some fresh garlic. I left the skin on the garlic because I'm going to give this a saute, and I don't want the garlic to burn. But eventually I am going to peel off that skin. But you'll just want to saute this. You could just boil all of these ingredients if you're making the salsa. Okay, so I peeled the garlic, and it turns out I used 3 cloves of garlic. I thought I had 2. And just a cup of water. It's like 3/4 of a cup to a cup. Cover with a lid and let that boil and simmer for about 10 minutes. I like adding ground cumin into the mix, into the salsa for these entomatadas, so I'm just going to grind this up and add it to the blender cup later. So here this has been boiling, and I'm just going to shut off the heat, and I'm going to puree this very well. So here I'm adding it into a blender cup. And this is another reason I didn't really add tons of water. It's just enough. Here I'm shaking in my cumin and a little bit of chicken bouillon powder going in and some salt. A lot of the seasoning spices are to taste. Okay, and I'm just going to puree this really well and now pour it back into the pan. I'm going to keep this on a super low heat. You'll want to season and salt to taste at this point, and it's ready. Here, my masa is ready, so it's time to make these corn tortillas. Let me preface this by saying I'm not a professional when it comes to making corn tortillas because I don't make them all the time. I do have a good memory. Once I make like maybe 2 or 3, I get into the groove of things, but you'll want to just firmly press the dough into a flat disc. You could use 2 flat surfaces and just press. You don't need a tortilla press. And then onto a really well-heated griddle. So I slapped this tortilla onto the griddle, and it created these lovely air pockets, but when I flipped it over, it looks like this. And I believe because I just kind of slapped it right onto the hot griddle, so it trapped in some of that moisture and like hot air or steam. But you know, not bad. But then when I gently lay it, it actually does make a difference. It does cook a lot more evenly, and I even got it to puff up. So there's that, the more you know. Here are some of the mistakes that I made when I first made the first few. For example, I didn't commit to laying it down and it folded. Once this dough folds, you cannot unfold it. Again, I did it so slowly that it just kind of folded, it creased. What am I doing? Just creating a disaster, but you know, it is what it is. But here is the results of all of my hard work. Not bad. Some people just dip these into the salsa and make the entomatadas. But what I like to do, and a lot of people, you want to give it a light fry. Why, you ask? Because it does help to keep the texture once you dip and sauce it into the tomato salsa. Now, you can choose not to do this, but you run the risk of the tortilla kind of disintegrating or just getting mushy. So there's that. Okay, so light fry going on a baking sheet, and now just take one of these. This one got extra crispy, so I'm just going to dunk it. It'll kind of soften, loosen, and it'll still hold its shape and texture. So again, I didn't commit to the dunking. It fell into the sauce. I'm using a spoon. It's gonna taste good. By the way, the one jalapeno that I used is kind of spicy, so I kind of regret not taking out the seeds, but you know, that's just a little fair warning to you all if you don't want it extra spicy. Okay, so I'm gonna fill this with queso fresco. It's a farmer's cheese, it's very crumbly, and I added onion. And you just fold it over and repeat the process. I'm going to make 3, and I can already tell you I'm excited about this. Just the fact that I made the homemade corn tortillas, I already know it's going to taste just like my grandmother's, because I actually make this a lot simpler and I use store-bought, but just that touch of homemade really makes a difference. So if you've got the time and you want to give the effort, make the tortillas homemade. It does make a difference, and it's a bit more traditional, if I can say that. Okay, so one more, dunking it. You can use tongs, but my hands are sort of used to the heat. And if you want, you can fill these with chicken, but what my grandmother would do, she would serve the cheese-filled entomatadas, or even enchiladas cheese-filled, and add baked or fried chicken on the side. It was the best. But this is what I'm working with today. Some garnishes of Mexican sour cream, some more queso fresco and onion, and this is the meal. I almost want to cry because it tastes just like my grandmother's. My abuelita does not cook anymore, so a lot of her home-cooked meals, it's rare that we get one. So when I can recreate it at home, it truly is the best. I'm going to show you my favorite way to make marinated tomatoes, because I'm putting them on a delicious delicatessen Italian-style sandwich called the Stallone. Okay, so I'm starting off with 2 Roma tomatoes. You can use all Roma tomatoes. This is just the combo I had today. I'm also using grape, and what I'm going to do first is create the marinade. So making marinated tomatoes, it always comes out best if you let it set overnight, but I want to make the sandwich today, so I'm going to let it marinate for like 2 hours or so. I'm starting off with 1½ tablespoons of red wine vinegar, 1½ tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. I'm also going to add cracked black pepper. I'm kind of eyeballing things because I make this all the time. I'm also going to add like 1 teaspoon of dried basil. If you have fresh basil, that works even better. I'm also adding probably like a 1/4 teaspoon of dried oregano. And as always, I like to say you want to season and salt to your preference. Okay, now I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes. And the ratios of these dried herbs and seasonings are up to you. Here I'm going to grate in 1 clove of garlic. By the way, while I'm doing this, I just want to mention this marinade that I'm making for the tomatoes, I love to also add red onion and cucumbers into the mix. It's such a refreshing type salad, and the marinade is so good. Okay, that goes in. Now I'm going to add a pinch of salt. Again, salt to your preference. You can start with a 1/4 teaspoon. And now all I'm going to do is mix and combine well. And what I'm going to do now is add around 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. And I'm just going to drizzle that in, and it's going to emulsify. It will thicken as you whisk and emulsify it. So you might wonder if you need to add maybe a pinch of sugar. You definitely can, but I feel like the natural sweetness of the tomatoes are enough for this marinated dish. Okay, so that is emulsified. Now I'm going to work on cutting and prepping the tomatoes. So I have a motley crew of tomatoes that need to be used, but typically I would use maybe around 5 Roma tomatoes for the ratio of marinade that I just created. And I'm just going to cut these into like wedges. Some people just don't want to eat tomato seeds and the center. You can remove that if you like. Today I am using these marinated tomatoes for a sandwich. Some of you may know of this sandwich. It's called the Stallone, and you can get it at Tony's Delicatessen. I believe it's a national chain, and it's an Italian like food sandwich shop, and this is what it looks like. It's Italian sub roll with a variety of meats, provolone cheese, marinated tomatoes, and pesto as a spread. It's so good and simple to make, and I've been making it at home, and I want to show you. So I'm adding the tomatoes to the marinade, and like I said, overnight for best results. I'm going to be using this in a couple of hours for dinner. So I'm going to add all of that into the bowl, And you'll want to give it a mix and give it a taste. If you want to adjust the seasoning, if you want more crushed red pepper flakes, go for it. And quite honestly, I don't know Tony's delicatessen recipe for marinated tomatoes, but I just figured this is what I do anyway, so that's what I'm going to do today. Okay, so I'm gonna cover this and put it in the fridge. So now let's build the sandwich. I got a toasty sub roll, and the first layer is going to be pesto. I have store-bought pesto. If you really want to be extra, you can make that from scratch. So I'm just going to add a couple of spoonfuls and just spread it onto the bread. Recently, I was perusing social media and I saw that this sandwich was trending, and I thought, I know this sandwich. I've had this sandwich before. So let me show everyone how I make my homemade version. Okay, so pesto on. And now I'm going to add my red onion slices. And the type of meats that go on this sandwich, I'm going to be using, and this is actually what goes on it, smoked ham. I have some capicola, Genoa salami, sopressata, and provolone. And I probably said all of that wrong. But yeah, that is the combo that they put on this Stallone sandwich. So I'm just going to start building it. And there is probably a really good way to put the sandwich together. For example, I think I should have put the tomatoes on the bread so I don't slide around, but such is life. I'm gonna make it work. Okay, so my tomatoes have been marinating for a while, so now I'm going to add them right on top of everything. I even like the marinade to be in the sandwich. It just gives everything a really good flavor. It brings it together. The rich deli meats and the brightness of the tomatoes in the marinade, it's just so good. Such a good combo. And that's it. This is the Stallone sandwich. And this is what I'm making everyone for dinner. But I'm going to try it first. Quality control. And I know some of you are thinking, why didn't you just go to Tony's Delicatessen and pick some up? Well, right now I'm not near one. I mean, I could drive and go get this, but it's fun making stuff at home. Gosh, this is so good. I have some toasted sourdough. Ricotta cheese, just marinated tomatoes. I added some red onion into the mix. See, like that. Crushed red pepper flakes. You see that? Here we go. Mmm. Mmm. So let me show you what I consider the OG of avocado toast. This is something I love to do with a cup of coffee in the morning. It's very simple, nothing fancy, and it's so good. Okay, so you're going to take fresh pan bolillo, but this is day old, so I kind of wet it and put it in the air fryer. It got a little too toasty, but it's crusty on the exterior and soft on the inside. Perfect. Yum. Cut it open. Oh my gosh, this is like the best. My ripe avocado, and I'm just going to mash it in here. It's not a fancy sandwich, you guys. Pinch of salt, black pepper, and fresh tomato slices. And this is a simple sandwich that we would eat for breakfast with a cup of coffee. Ah, so good. Avocado toast too. Mmm. Mmm. Pour egg over zucchini for a delicious meal. I'm working with one zucchini, and what I'm going to do is place this cloth and my box grater here, and I'm going to grate this medium to large zucchini. I've cut off the ends. Ultimately, what you'll want to do is to try to squeeze out most of the water content and moisture from the zucchini. So shredding it makes that a lot easier. Okay, so what I'm going to do is add a pinch of salt, mix that around. You can let it set. This helps to draw out most of the moisture from the zucchini, and you'll want to just kind of twist the cloth and press any moisture and water content. This is also a good method if you are going to make homemade zucchini bread. And I skip this step, and it gets soggy if you bake it into bread, so make sure you squeeze out the moisture. So I have some rendered bacon fat or grease that I keep on the side of my stove. I'm going to use that last little bit, and here is a small baking dish. You could use something like a 6 to 7 square or round cake pan for this. Okay, so here is my prepped, grated, and pressed and squeezed zucchini. So I'm just going to add that as the bottom layer to my greased baking dish. You could also butter your baking dish, but I actually like to have rendered bacon fat for things like this. It adds a lot of flavor. Okay, so just continue to sort of create this bottom layer. Now I'm going to beat 5 large eggs in a bowl. I'm going to add a pinch of salt to the eggs. Here I'm going to shake in some onion powder and some smoked paprika. Season with Italian seasoning. You could add garlic powder, salt, pepper. It all works. Use what you've got. So I'm going to just combine those and now pour over the zucchini. I'm going to add some sliced Roma tomato, just one large Roma tomato for this, to cover the top surface area. And you'll want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. I have baked this particular dish in a 400 Fahrenheit oven. That also works, you just have to watch the cook time. So I've grated some Parmesan cheese and I'm just going to add that on the top of the egg and zucchini. You could also sub the Parmesan with your favorite sharp cheddar cheese. It totally works. I actually sometimes use Oaxaca cheese. It just depends what I have in my fridge. Now I'm going to add the sliced tomatoes. Sometimes I like to add Italian sausage into the mix with bell peppers, onion, and mushrooms. It makes a great variation to this baked dish. It's so good. This took about 30 to 35 minutes in my oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit, but you'll want to watch it to make sure that it's just cooked in the center. Cook time always varies. And I'll show you once I put this piece on a plate, but this smells and looks fabulous. I'm roasting tomatoes because I'm making a delicious duo of tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. I'm peeling the roasted garlic and everything is going to go into my blender cup. I'm going to add some dried thyme into the blender cup, smoked paprika, some granulated onion powder and chicken bouillon powder, some water, like a half cup, and give it a whirl. In a preheated little pot, I'm going to add that and let it simmer to stay heated. And now let's work on the grilled cheese sandwich. You make it how you like. Today, buttered bread, shredded cheese, another slice of buttered bread, and you get it golden brown and crispy on the outside and melty in the center. And here you have the perfect duo, the perfect meal. I eat this year round because it's so comforting and delicious. Oh my God. So 1 English cucumber, and I'm just going to cut that into chunks. Add several tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. I'll give you something in the description below. Here I have Dijon mustard going in, like a teaspoon or so, and some honey to taste. Start with a teaspoon. Here, half of a lemon, the juice of half this lemon, Italian herb blend, a couple glugs of olive oil. You could do equal parts balsamic vinegar to olive oil. It's up to you. Pinch of salt, and I'm going to grate in some fresh garlic and emulsify it, give it a taste, and adjust. Here I have some grape tomatoes, red onion going in. Ratios are up to you, and this dressing, which I love, and some cracked black pepper. And you know I have to have my red chili flakes. And here I'm squeezing more lemon juice and salt to taste. Now give it a mix, and you have a very delicious cucumber salad. It's my favorite. This is a chicken cucumber salad, so I'm adding chicken. Give it a mix, taste, adjust things to your preference, and dig in. It is so good. It's so perfect for spring, summer, winter, fall. I don't care. I eat this salad all the time.